So, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
What do you want to be doing?
What's the plan?
I just want to be happy. I want to learn everything.
I'll be stinking rich.
He's going to London.
London.
I'm getting out of here. I'll be staying at 23 Piss Off Avenue, London, W fuck.
He represents something that I guess that we don't kind of focus on enough. And I think that is the sort of like the tenacity to just be like perseverant and to withstand like sort of injustice, I think, you know, in that whole time. And he is, yeah, to me, he's just so kind of his unashamedness of just and like just his nature is just so unapologetic in terms of like how he embraces his identity, and he's able to like just step out into the world with such a like, I don't know, he's so carefree. And it just really struck me because it was actually quite like, I found that quite like a scary thing to encompass, because like I wish that I could kind of like go out into the world every day and sort of like not care as much as he does about like what people think about him. And that was like it felt like it was going to be a bit of like a difficult headspace to get in. But, you know, once I literally kind of like stepped into his shoes, like it was just so liberating to be in that space. And I just love what he represents, because I think he represents to me like all of the sort of like trailblazing people and who just sort of like contributed so much to queer culture in the 80s. These were people who were really brave, like to just be themselves at a time when it wasn't sort of like, when it was really frowned upon to be yourself. And he like just sort of embodies that completely.
The districts of men like us have always been hidden away in secret. But then there's the real world.
There's a million pubs and things. I love it here.
Even though that in terms of, you know, HIV and AIDS, that we've definitely like made a lot of advancements in terms of like how people live with the disease and how just sort of general medical advancements in that sense, I think that history still has this like strange ability to repeat itself. And I think, you know, if you look at how society like vilified and marginalized those people who were a part of the queer community, or like even allies of the queer community, I think we're still seeing like a similar vilification now. And I think if you just think about people who hold power and just the sort of like the way that pockets of society, even outside of the queer community, just like anyone who is deemed as like other, anyone who is not sort of like the norm, like pockets of society are always pushed to one side. So I think what the show showed sort of like me on reflection is just like how like humans can be really cruel without sort of like putting too much of a sort of like sad stamp on it. I think on the opposite side of that, there is also so much joy, like so much joy. I think there's like a huge polarity in the show. There's tragedy and there is joy, and you don't have the tragedy like without the joy, or at least I don't think it is as effective. And yeah, friendship, love, community, finding your people, yeah, and just loving one another and just embracing life, just yeah, and just having a lust for life. So and all that stuff is just like really heartwarming. So we had an amazing team, Ita O'Brien and David Thackeray and Elma McAlpine, who were our intimacy coordinators. And in terms of my access point in being able to sort of like just step into those scenes feeling like comfortable, the work that they do reminds me of learning choreography. And essentially you are learning choreography, and that is a world that I came from, like, you know, sort of like learning steps. So yeah, you learn these steps and you piece them together. And then of course you can sort of like bring all of this sort of like character aspects within that, like you layer it. There's a really considered process. And I'm so glad that like Ita and Elle and David and that whole community of people who were like doing such amazing work for media, I'm so glad that they're like having their moment to be seen and heard, because I think what they do is so important, because we've now got such an open dialogue, and rightly so, about like sex and sex on screen, because of obviously so many social sort of like things that have been going on in the past few years, or that are only just coming to light. And so yeah, it was really great to be in an environment where you could like, I don't know, because it's funny, isn't it? Because, you know, like I think about being young and like watching films and stuff, and it was like, oh my God, this is so cringy. There's like a sex scene happening, and it's like you're watching it with your parents. It's like, oh my God, this is so awkward. But actually, like, me doing this show just made me realize like how important it is to really talk about that stuff and not be afraid of that stuff, because like it's just a part of life. And especially in our story, like it is how they were expressing themselves, it's how they were having fun, like, and I think we don't sort of like engage in that element of it enough. Like, it's fun, like it's part of growing up, it's like a part of discovering who you are. And I'm so glad that we see that, and I'm so glad that we had the time to give it as much thought and attention as we did as the rest of the scenes in the show. It's not like, oh, like we've got this awkward thing now, let's get that out of the way. Like you were able to sort of like have autonomy over it and talk about it, and that was just really, 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 really great.
Morning. Morning.
Have you seen this?
He said, she said, they said.
I think it's amazing because the fact that like there isn't any sort of like hint shown within the show, like the show doesn't ever tackle the issue and go, right, this was then and this is what is happening now. Treatment was so kind of concentrated, and there wasn't sort of, no one had made the advancements that they'd made right now. And I think that is like the way that young people engage with these issues, the fact that they can watch that show and then literally like pick up their phone and like go, you know, they're curious and inquisitive and like want to know. And we have a duty to do that as well, because this is stuff like that we don't get taught at school. So I think, you know, we've definitely got like a duty and a responsibility being sort of like open in terms of our dialogue about sexual health and our like sexual well-being. And yeah, obviously you've mentioned PrEP, so that is sort of like our most kind of like tangible evidence of like how far we've come in terms of those medical advancements. But I think we can't take that for granted. And I think, you know, having a show like this will probably show people why we can't take these things for granted. Like, we have to see the journey and we have to know the trials that people have been through to be able to get us to that pill that like keeps you safe. I think celebrating difference. I think, I love my community, but I think that even still, like within the community, there's like intersections of people who do get left behind and people who don't really have a voice. There's like groups of people who still kind of like gain preference over other groups of people like in the queer community. So I think it is just really important that we are shining a light on all aspects of life, because like I think now what we're seeing is that like queerness is like it's universal, like it's within so many cultures. And you know, I think, yeah, it is just really important that we're giving everyone just like their moment in the light, because I think, you know, as much as we sort of can feel like that we are marginalized as a community, as queer people, like it's very easy for us ourselves to fall into a trap of actually keeping other people at the sideline as well, like within our own community. So we have to, I don't know, we talk about inclusivity quite a lot, and I think that we just have to exercise that in the right way in all aspects of what we're doing.